On this edition, I'm going to go over the UFC title picture, the UFC heavyweight title picture following UFC 146. Now, UFC 146 happened, all heavyweight main event, and you figured we'd have a clear picture of who's going to be the next top contender and get the next title fight in the heavyweight division. Obviously, Junior dos Santos is still the champion, defeating Frank Mir. Cain Velasquez defeats Bigfoot Silva in impressive fashion. Roy Nelson knocks out Dave Herman. Exciting fight. I mean, very quick fight, but an exciting knockout. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go over some of the potential fighters who are worthy or eligible for the next title fight. So I'm just going to go over the heavyweight title picture. So the first fighter is Cain Velasquez. Now, if there's a fighter I think that deserves the next title fight, it's Cain Velasquez. Cain Velasquez absolutely dominated Bigfoot Silva. He's coming off of his loss from Junior dos Santos, getting knocked out in the first round. However, the big issue with this one is that Cain Velasquez does have a broken hand. He's going to be out for about 6 months was the estimate that they had for him, and then he has to start training on top of that. So I do believe Cain Velasquez is worthy of the next title fight, but it's a question if the UFC is willing to wait that time and have Junior dos Santos wait that amount of time for another title shot. So I would love to see Cain Velasquez fight, and people, this is the one thing that's, I don't want to say driving me nuts, but I don't get people like, oh, well, Cain Velasquez fought Bigfoot Silva. He's not that good of a fighter. He shouldn't have been fighting in the first place. Yeah, Bigfoot Silva is not a top 5 heavyweight. Cain is a top 5 heavyweight. However, the UFC 146 card was in a bind. Bigfoot Silva is still a top 10 heavyweight, but I think the one question, people saying that Bigfoot Silva is nowhere near the talent level of Cain Velasquez, me included, who was saying I don't see this matchup. Cain Velasquez dominated that fight from bell to bell. It didn't even reach the second bell. Cain Velasquez took Bigfoot Silva down, got back to his roots, and beat the guy down and won the fight via TKO. So to say that he's not worthy of another title fight after a fight with Bigfoot Silva, I think it's absolutely ludicrous, to be quite honest. I mean, Cain Velasquez, what I liked about him in this fight is that he went back to his roots, went back to his wrestling, getting the fight down to the ground and beating guys up. Now, I think I would love to see Junior dos Santos versus Cain Velasquez too, the rematch, because I think it would be a different fight this time around. I think Cain will be relentless with his wrestling and his takedowns, and if there's any guy who could take Junior dos Santos down, it is definitely Cain Velasquez. It's just a matter if he's going to come out, try and push the pace, and try and get a hold of Junior dos Santos to take him down. So if I were to pick a fight, the next logical heavyweight title fight, and if the UFC is willing to wait, it would be Cain Velasquez versus Junior dos Santos too. That's my choice that I would like to see. That makes the most sense. However, it's a matter of the UFC is willing to wait. The next fighter that I would like to see, or that could be in the heavyweight title picture, would be Fabricio Werdum. Now, I mean, you know, we're talking about, I mean, Alistair Overeem's out, Cain Velasquez is hurt, and if the UFC's looking for a guy that they could put right in to a heavyweight title fight, it would probably be Fabricio Werdum. Now, personally, I don't really want to see Junior dos Santos versus Fabricio Werdum too. It's nothing against Fabricio Werdum. However, this fight's happened a long time ago. I know there's rematches in UFC all the time, but I don't think Fabricio Werdum, he did beat Roy Nelson. He hasn't fought since then. For him to get a title fight off of that just doesn't make sense to me. However, who else is there to put in for a title fight? Fabricio Werdum is probably the highest up guy and probably the most available guy right now. So if I'm talking about a title fight that makes the most sense, the most logical choice, if they're not willing to wait for Cain Velasquez, it would be Fabricio Werdum. However, I think the only way to really save this fight, or to, not save it, but to get the most out of this fight would be Fabricio Werdum versus Junior dos Santos, the rematch in Brazil. I think that's the best way to do it. It would be good for the Brazil fans. I mean, it would be a card that would sell, and I think the crowd would rally behind these two Brazilian fighters from obviously their home country. But I think that would be the best way to hype or sell this fight. That's if the UFC isn't willing to wait for Cain Velasquez. So that's what I have in regards to Fabricio Werdum. However, I see Junior dos Santos knocking out Fabricio Werdum again. So the next person I think, not a logical choice, but we're talking about guys in the heavyweight title picture. Daniel Cormier seems to make a lot of sense. I know he hasn't fought in the UFC. He's coming off winning the Strikeforce Grand Prix. He does have a broken hand as well, and he has to wait. But if there is a guy that I would like to see, maybe not an instant title shot, but I mean a guy who could potentially be a top contender would be Daniel Cormier. The guy absolutely mows through all of his opponents, or all of his opponents. We're talking about a guy who can take down Junior dos Santos. Cain Velasquez, Daniel Cormier. These two guys are some of the best wrestlers in the heavyweight division. I mean, the guy practically picked up Josh Barnett and threw him over his head. However, they're saying that Daniel Cormier has one more fight in Strikeforce, and I love Strikeforce fights. I just don't see the point of keeping Daniel Cormier in Strikeforce for another fight. The guy is UFC ready. He is a high caliber fighter. He is a top 5 heavyweight in my honest opinion. So I'd love to see Daniel Cormier come over, but he does have one fight left in Strikeforce. Hopefully, when he does, he could come over, maybe do a top contender fight, and then get his title shot. But I think the big question that we have to face here is, let's say Cain Velasquez is the heavyweight champion at the end of the year. Will Cain Velasquez and Daniel Cormier fight each other, being that they both train at AKA? I think that's the biggest factor. So either one guy has to drop down in the weight division, which, I'd love to see Daniel Cormier at light heavyweight. However, I mean, it would be a good fight. There's no doubt. And Cain Velasquez versus Daniel Cormier would be a good fight. It's just a matter of these two guys want to fight each other. So I think that's the biggest issue in regards to that. Another fighter I think that needs to be brought up is Roy Nelson. Now, I absolutely love Roy Nelson. I'm a big fan of Roy Nelson. He's practically every average Joe's favorite fighter. The guy always brings the fight. He's got knockout power. He takes a beating. He's got a chin of steel. He's got power in his hands. He looks for the knockout. And the guy has a good ground game. And if we're talking about a guy where the fans rally behind, I mean, Roy Nelson probably got the biggest cheers at UFC 146 at the weigh-ins, his walkout. I mean, even when he was called in the octagon, people love Roy Nelson, and people love to watch him fight. So, I mean, would Roy Nelson versus Junior dos Santos be a good fight? I mean, the first one, I mean, it wasn't, I don't want to say it wasn't the most entertaining fight. Roy Nelson brought the fight the entire time. He took a beating in the process. Do I see Roy Nelson beating Junior dos Santos in that process? I don't see Roy Nelson beating Junior dos Santos. I don't see him getting him down to the ground. I mean, he could hit the Hail Mary, but I see Junior dos Santos winning that fight again. But if you're looking for options, if the UFC is willing to bypass Fabricio Verdum, they're looking to not wait for Cain Velasquez, Roy Nelson could be a choice. However, Roy Nelson, let's not forget that he lost his last fight, and then he defeated Dave Herman. So, does it make sense in the title picture about people who are paying their dues and earning it? Roy Nelson's been in the UFC for quite some time. He has defeated some good fighters, but he's also lost quite a few fights. So I don't think it would make the most sense. However, I would like to see Roy Nelson fight, but it does not make the most sense. And lastly, the last person I'd like to go over is that obviously this isn't a logical choice. This is a choice that makes sense at all. Alistair Overeem. Dana White recently said that Alistair Overeem, when he's back, would most likely be the #1 contender. So I think from the group of guys that we were just talking about, that I was just talking about, I think Junior dos Santos will fight whoever the UFC matches him up with, whether it's Cain, whether it's Fabricio, whether it's Roy Nelson, whoever it be. I think once that fight happens, maybe another fight, Alistair Overeem will come back and be the top contender and most likely get the title fight. Now, I'm not here to get into the topic about him and passing drug tests and all over. If he could come back, pass the drug test, if there is a heavyweight fight that needs to happen, it is Junior dos Santos versus Alistair Overeem. I think we all need to know who is the best pure striker or the best striker in the heavyweight division. This fight needs to happen, and whether it's down the road, or whether Junior's not a champion or not, whether Alistair's not a champion or not, these two need to fight, and it needs to happen. This fight could be one of the quickest fights ever. It could be one of the best technical striking matches of all time. So this fight does need to happen. So that's what I have in regards to. I think that Cain Velasquez is the most deserving guy of the next title fight. I think the most logical choice that makes the most sense would be Fabricio Verdum. Daniel Cormier, I mean, does it even count as a reach? No, I mean, he's not going to be in the UFC anytime soon. I'd like to see him at least get a title shot sometime soon. Roy Nelson's a reach, but it's possible. And obviously, Alistair Overeem is the next top contender in the waiting when he gets back from his suspension. And that's what I have for this edition. It's Kyle Delaney signing off.